Ever wondered how effective mental health resources can change lives? Jasmin Parks-Papadopoulos, a former toxic chef, is currently the Chief Growth Officer for CHOW, Culinary Hospitality Outreach and Wellness. A product of the Great Resignation, which ended her 15-year career as an executive chef and head of food and beverage, Jasmine came to CHOW in 2020 for support in detaching herself from an industry that she had hidden her discomfort in for so long. She needed to find new ways forward and surround herself with people like her who were struggling to establish their identity and support their mental health. In this episode, we uncover the fascinating connection between CHOW and the hit show The Bear. Jasmine discusses her enthusiastic mission to collaborate with the series, reflecting on how the show's themes resonate deeply with her own experiences in hospitality. Hear about her journey of advocacy for mental health in the industry and the exciting potential that lies in partnership with The Bear. Tune in for an inspiring conversation filled with valuable insights and heartfelt stories that emphasize the importance of mental health support in the hospitality world. There are resources available in the episode, show notes as well, and you can visit chowco.org for additional resources. There's also a link in the show to sign a petition that Jasmine has created in order to get on the show The Bear. Welcome to the No Hesitations podcast, the show where restaurant leaders learn tools, tactics, and habits from the world's greatest operators. I'm your host, Kristen Marvin, with Solutions by Kristen. I've spent the last 2 decades in the restaurant industry and now partner with restaurant owners to develop their leaders and scale their businesses without wasting time and energy so they can achieve work-life balance and make more money. You can now engage with me on the show and share topics you'd like to hear about, leadership lessons you want to learn, and any feedback that you have. Simply click the link at the top of the show notes, and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting. Okay, Jasmine, let's kick off today by letting the listeners know a little bit about CHOW, and then we're going to deep dive into the conversation of why CHOW and The Bear need to team up together.
Absolutely. I love this. So CHOW's mission is to support the lives of food, beverage, hospitality workers through shared stories, skills, and resources. What that means to us is that we very intentionally put together peer-to-peer support programs, educational opportunities, and community initiatives that allow for folks to receive support, and to build a sustainable workforce.
Awesome. And talk a little bit about your role and what you've seen as far as the impact with the organization so far in the years that you've been involved.
Yeah, I'm in a very fortunate position. I started off at CHOW as an attendee and then a volunteer. And so I am uniquely trained within the organization. And I have been very privileged to see the growth in the last few years, and our impact is massive. What used to be pre-pandemic, a very small and well-attended meeting in Denver has now grown into an international nonprofit where our programming and our peer-to-peer support meetings are visited from so many places around the world. And we have been incredibly fortunate to receive both qualitative and quantitative data that shows us that we are making an incredible impact in the food, beverage, hospitality community.
Awesome. I mean, we have so many resources available, and we're going to put all this in the show notes, but the website is just full of mental health, substance abuse resources. The meetings are absolutely incredible, right? There's meetings every day in multiple cities, in person and virtually. We have this new text service, which I'm obsessed with. I signed up for the texts. I've been getting them every day. Yesterday's was beautiful, and I sent Aaron some feedback over, but I love that they're very short, brief, little tidbits on how you can take care of yourself that day and how you can take care of your team. Some of them are text, some of them are images. The one yesterday that came out was a beautiful image of self-care versus self-soothing. And the self-care, if I can just read it off here, I got a lot out of it yesterday. Self-care, it said, what can Monday me do to serve Tuesday me? And there were 5 options. 1, exercise and eat intentionally. 2, set up a therapy appointment. 3, practice sleep hygiene. 4, spend time meditating. And 5, practice healthy boundaries versus self-soothing, which the question was posed, what can I do to make myself feel better right now? And then 5 options here as well. 1, listen to a happy playlist. 2, take a long bath. 3, go for a shave or haircut. 4, get a relaxing massage. Or 5, catch up with a friend. I love this tool. I wish I would have had it when I was in restaurants, because I would have immediately sent this out on our staff communication platform, whether it was text or email, or hung it up and posted it on the communication board for the day so that people can gently look at it if they want to and absorb it. There's so much goodness here. CHOW is incredible, huge advocate. Obviously, proud to be a part of it, and super, super grateful you're here. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing that feedback with us. We pride ourselves on being a listening organization. So a lot of the programming that we have developed, like the text service, is in the spirit of meeting folks where they are at. We know that food, beverage, hospitality industry workers are exceptionally busy. And sometimes, even though we do have a developed 4-hour course that addresses at length a lot of these kind of tidbits that we have sized down and minimized to share with folks, a lot of times it's just not feasible to make the time for those 4 hours of training. And so we want to make sure that we're delivering that content in as many formats as possible so that it remains accessible, relevant to folks who are working in the industry, and just very easy to establish a connection with and through.
Yeah, I love it. So let's talk about the bear. It's season 3. You've been sending emails, and you've been on a mission for, I don't know, did you start in season 1, or I know season 2 was when I started to see it come out. But talk a little bit about this mission. I mean, you're doing so much work here.
Talk about your long-standing war of attrition with the bear.
Totally. Where's this beyond CHOW? Where's this passion and motivation to connect with the bear coming from for you?
I love this question. On a personal level, I was very fortunate to be able to watch episode 1. We were on a text thread at the time. Our CHOW CEO, our CHOW founder, and I were on a text thread, and we were just kind of talking, we've been hearing about it and how accurate it was and how just, pointed the content was. And everyone was like, we've watched the trailer. It's incredibly dysregulating. Is anyone going to watch it? And of course I was like, I'm going to watch it. I'm a person who, while I have an extensive background in the food, beverage, hospitality industry, in a past life, I was an executive chef. I'm not a fan of food competitions, but I love the movies, the series, all of that. And so I went ahead and watched the first episode, and it was the physical reaction that I had to consuming that content. It's almost as if you had picked me up off of my living room couch and you had just thrown me into a Saturday 9 p.m. in service. All of the physical ramifications, the emotional processing that I would have felt in that time is exactly what I was experiencing from home. So episode 1, I sat down and I wrote an article about it. And then I made it to episode 3, I think. And then I started emailing people and asking, how did this feel for you? What were the kind of reactions that you had to it? How does it compute? For me, the part that stood out the most is that I had a kind of a parallel experience at the time with MAID. I don't know if you're familiar with MAID, but it centers uniquely around kind of emotional abuse. And what I found wonderful about it is that, the conversations around MAID were so kind of resource focused. And as a survivor of intimate partner violence myself, I found that to be incredible. And it just kind of started me down this rabbit hole internally, where I kept thinking to myself, I'm often protected when I'm consuming content around intimate partner violence. There's always a banner, there's a trigger warning, there's a banner with resources. There's this understanding that, if you choose to consume this content, there are places where you can go to take care of those complicated feelings that arise. And so I just started to do a little bit of research about, what do we consider, who came up with trigger warnings? What do we consider a trigger warning? What is the use of it? And why do some things feature resources and others do not? And I found myself coming back to that core idea that these physical reactions that I was experiencing at seeing this very curated industry content, right? The content is meant to be dysregulating. The creators and producers of that show have done an incredible job at showing very accurate and sensory experiences. There's the very close cans of the knives that are very fast, and the escalated volume and all of that. A person who has been through a 9 p.m. dinner service feels all of those things. And I noticed that once I got to episode 3, I was incredibly fortunate to know that CHOW was there. So the next day I woke up and I went to a CHOW meeting, and the first thing I said was, y'all, the bear. Does anyone want to talk about the bear? And I was able to talk about all of it. And it wasn't from a negative perspective. A lot of it was very morally neutral. Did you feel this? How did it feel when this? Did you notice that this? And there was a very protected place for me to go process all of the complex emotions that had kept me up the night before. That's when it occurred to me that the show does not organically lead people there. And I recognize this kind of the lack of protected resources and trigger warnings in the show. And it kind of became I'm like a dog with a bone.
Yeah, I love it.
It became my thing. Yeah.
Yeah. What did that first article say?
I have experienced a lot of what I experienced watching season 1 is an incredible kind of my exit out of the industry was very, very complicated. My presence in the industry was very, very complicated. And I had done a lot of processing work to be able to, post leaving the industry, I did a lot of CHOW meetings, a lot of therapy to find out how to integrate into civilian life. For me, being a chef was not a part of my identity, but my whole identity. And so it was very difficult and very hard earned for me to figure out, 1, who I was outside of that, 2, what I could do with myself outside of that. And could I be any different than what I had been as a damaging individual in the food, beverage, hospitality industry? And so it was very strange to me that a lot of that process had to do with, I'm so glad I'm out of there. I was so damaging when I was there. There's so much work to be done, on the other side of that. And I can be a really positive kind of driving force in this movement for the sustainability, workforce sustainability movement. And I didn't miss the industry. A lot of my peers who left the industry as a result of the Great Resignation also were very much like, gosh, don't you miss it sometimes? The camaraderie, don't you miss this? Don't you miss that? And for me, it was kind of like, oh no, I don't miss the person I was when I was in the industry at all. The reactions that I had watching season 1 is that that's exactly what happened. I was like, my goodness, though, the camaraderie and the conversations, and look at how familiar this all is to me. This feels so, this is home to me. The truth is that for me, the kitchen hid a lot of dysfunction that I was comfortable actively participating in. And it was dysfunction that I recognized. I'm a 3rd generation chef. I say often in these public speaking opportunities that my father parented much like he chefed. And that had a very large influence on me personally. So a lot of that dysfunction that I know that folks watch on The Bear and, they see a lot of damage, that damage was familiar to me. And so a lot of the processing that I did after watching season 1 was kind of confronting the idea that dysfunction was familiar to me, and that there's something outside of that. There's a place where you can take all of those really dense feelings and unpack them with people who understand, who get it, who have been there, in an area where there is no judgment.
Yeah, I had a very similar reaction. I think when we watched the first season, similar to you, I love anything hospitality related, any TV shows, any movies. I can relate to them. They're comfortable for me. I love the storyline. I love the food. I love the interaction, all of it. And I can't remember if it was season 1 or season 2, but the point where all the tickets were just flying out of the printer. I've been in that exact scenario, and I had to have Tyler pause it and just, I sat up for a second on the couch and I was like, my heart is racing right now. This is very, very stressful. So we had to take a break and come back to it. And I was excited about season 3. And I wondered if it would be different. I know there were some new teammates that came in, consultants and things that were a part of the show. And I was really excited to see if there was going to be a different perspective or just what the character evolution had been. And we watched the first 3 episodes, and I just found myself, I think, even more stressed out than I was watching season 1 and season 2. and it reminded me, because I've spent the majority of my career in the front of the house. And every time the characters were able to walk out of the tumultuous, scary, high energy, stressful kitchen and walk back into the front of house, my blood pressure immediately went down, because I remembered you could walk out of that situation, right? And go back in the front of the house where the guests were calm and the air conditioning was, it was cooler temperature, and it was just, the whole vibe was completely different, right? The music was great, all these things. And so I told, after watching the 3rd episode, I had to call it quits. I am so protective now of the energy that I let in. And I think I don't want to be around anything negative and stressful. It is also a really tough reminder that it is where the restaurant industry was. There are restaurants that are still operating like that today. And I think there was a little bit of sadness for me too, that knowing how hard you've been working on this project and knowing how many conversations we've had about the importance of trying to team up Chow and the Bear, I think there was some sadness for me of going, I'm not seeing the impact here. And kudos to you for fighting. I just shut down and went, I can't deal with this shit right now, right? I'm choosing not to deal with it. But hey, everyone. Before we dive back into our episode, let's talk about a crucial aspect of restaurant leadership: taking back control of your life by setting boundaries. As a restaurant owner or manager, you know how challenging it can be to juggle everything, and saying no can be even more difficult. I've created a guide with 10 steps to help you set boundaries and reclaim your time and energy. Visit kristenmarvin.com/say-no to grab your copy and start making positive changes today. Now back to the show. Thanks so much for listening.
Howdy, listener. Are you also a podcaster seeking to stand out in the crowded audio landscape? I'm here to help. L. Connor Voice, LLC offers top-tier audio engineering, meticulous content management, and more, all tailored to save you time and elevate your podcast to new heights of professionalism. With L. Connor Voice, you can focus on what you do best, creating captivating content, while I handle the rest. Say goodbye to hours spent tweaking audio levels and managing uploads. I ensure your podcast shines with polished sound quality and seamless delivery. Ready to take your podcast to the next level? Contact L. Connor Voice, LLC today and make producing your podcast as easy as hitting record. For more information, go to lconnorvoice.com. Links are in the episode notes.
Talk about, season 3 and this love letter. What have you seen, if any, progression in the show? Or do you feel like they're portraying the show and mental health issues in a better light, in a different light, in a worse light? What do you think?
Well, first, let me just affirm your human experience and let you know that I have heard this so many times that I can't get beyond this episode, and I completely support that choice, right? This is the wonderful thing about the way that media works in 2024 is that even our clicks matter. The content that you choose to consume. I'm a big, big proponent of exactly that, protecting your peace. For those that have experienced trauma, and a lot of our experiences and stories in the food, beverage, hospitality industry have been traumatic, trigger warnings just kind of help them avoid the fight or flight modes that occur when they are exposed to words or imagery that might remind them of that trauma. And so going into the bear without any kind of warning, and now you see this very nuanced, very curated content that is, I believe, designed to be kind of calling in, industry workers and industry veterans. I say in my article that I think that the bear is a love letter to the industry, because there are so many minimal details that might mean nothing to the average viewer who is not active in the industry, but to folks who have been in the industry are significant callbacks, right? The drinking out of a quart, prep container, and the methodical cleaning of the line, the sound that the expose line makes when the beads are rolling. These are all things that are incredibly intimate to us that might not have as much weight if you don't know the context of them, right? And so I think that these things are methodically placed there by somebody who has a very intimate and accurate understanding of these tiny little puzzle pieces that comprise the sensory overall experience of working in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. Like you said, the chaos, the sound interrupting from back of the house to the front of the house, and you can almost take a breath and relax because the temperature is different and the music is different. And, we have a long-standing history of romanticizing and repackaging the damage that the hierarchical structure of kitchens has done in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. We deliver it straight to the demographic of younger people who are almost moved to join the industry because of it. I myself became a chef in a period where maybe TV media was not such a big part of it, but my greats were Anthony Bourdain and Marco Pierre White with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth in the back of the line, these kind of rock star folks, one of them being, Rene Redzepi from Noma. And there's a lot of processing that happened for me personally in watching episode 3, as Carmi is kind of walking around the fields at Noma, and here's Rene Redzepi gazing longingly at the collection of his pictures of all of his dishes. And we now know on the back end that Noma is headed for closure, and it was called the end of fine dining, and that he was an incredibly damaging person within the industry because his business practices, while they were applauded through awards and recognition, they damaged the individuals that were working for him. These are conversations that are incredibly new, and they're incredibly complicated, right? Because we know that awards recognize restaurants by product and not necessarily by labor practices or the labor practices upon which that great product is created and pushed out. So when we continue to amplify businesses for excellence in product delivery, instead of worrying about their internal practices, and whether they are ethical or sustainable and what damage they do, we're sending out a message that communicates a very low incentive to change. The truth is that there are a lot of people who have been incredibly resistant to these practices, who have been thinking outside of the box, and who have been employing new tactics to support their workers, to create incredible products, and to build community around the food, beverage, hospitality industry. A lot of that is not seen in season 3. Right?
Yeah. And I am so, I think that's one of the things too one of the reasons why I was disappointed in the show. And I mentioned this to you earlier. I am so nervous that young people, the younger generations, are going to watch this show and think that this is okay to show up like this in the industry. And it's going to do more damage than it is good, because they don't know all those backstories that you just shared. And they don't know the hurt, and they don't know the substance abuse, and they don't know how much people cover up what's really going on and what's wrong, and how much people tolerate to the detriment of their own physical and mental health. And this generation is committed to taking care of themselves. So I'm kind of confused. I don't know. When you were talking about a trigger warning, I was just thinking, like, if does a company that's producing a show like this have a responsibility to put a trigger warning on the episode? And if they do that, do they have a responsibility to provide resources to back up that trigger warning? What do you think?
To me, the answer is unequivocally yes. To me personally, it's a question of accountability, because we can recognize and appreciate the cultural accuracy of the content that they are promoting while avoiding re-traumatizing food, beverage, hospitality industry workers. So to me, a big part of the article that I wrote is this is a love letter to the industry and what it's been so far. Because the truth is, Rene Redzepi you have used him for a reason, because in 15 seconds of showing his face, we all recognize him. We know the backstory. We understand exactly what you're trying to say with that, the complicated feelings that come up with that. So I understand why you chose to amplify these practices through these very recognizable greats, so that you can say the food, beverage, hospitality industry has been this. It has been built on this. It has been mentorship that has been stressful, damaging, traumatizing, and also, the little nods of beauty, which we all experience, because to me, at least, this is how complex trauma is. I can remember all of the chefs that actively damaged me and the way that I regurgitated that damage onto other people, while at the same time get emotional when somebody says, listen to the fish sing in the pan, listen to that sizzle, because in those traumatic times, there were incredible moments of camaraderie and beauty and connection. So being shown that can be an accurate representation of what it's been. And the missing component for me is to be able to take accountability and say, yes, and there are organizations that are doing impactful work to change it, to give you supports, to expose you to resources, to make sure that you have a safety net, a protected space around you where you can go talk about these things, where you can learn actionable small skills, the text service, all of these things that we offer. They're tiny little tidbits that amount to being building blocks of a very healthy foundation that can make a saner hospitality industry for all of us. So yes, I believe it is their responsibility to give us the resources and give us the trigger warnings, and to call to the impactful work that we are doing to make sure that this love letter to the industry ends with, we can do better. We are doing better. Here's where the work is being done. Find out more.
Yeah. What's the dream here? What do you want to see? Who do you want to talk to? How do you want to see this show up?
Gosh, that's such a great question. That is such a great question, because, one of the things that I so appreciate about this show on a personal level is that every episode has been such emotional catharsis for me. Every character has their own journey with figuring out the very complex way that they can stay in the industry. There's a lot of, abnegation of self and disincentivizing self-care, as well as a lot of passion and drive and purpose, which are a lot of the things that were really important to me when I was in the industry as well. And so they have such a beautiful way, in my opinion, of depicting the complexity of the human experience in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. And I hope that I'm going to say spoiler alert for anyone who's listening. In the final episode of season 3, there is the scene where a lot of the featured chefs, for those of us who have the background experience where we can visually recognize a lot of these high profile personalities, they're sitting around a table and they're kind of talking about their experience. To me, it looks like a lot of processing. Their peers sitting together, talking about their experience, what moves them, what drives their creativity. And I found myself watching this episode and thinking, this is a CHOW meeting. This is a CHOW meeting, sitting around and, taking your successes and your struggles to your peers so that you can unpack together. That is exactly what we do at CHOW. And I thought to myself, how wonderful this scene would have been if I had caught them before this episode was made, with just a few little plugins a little bit more trauma-informed language, this would have been incredible. Because, I mean, we know that TV has the power to change minds on political and social issues, right? Content drives public opinion so much nowadays, especially in that demographic that you're talking about, which are young folks just delving into their professional lives. And so we know that it can change the minds of mental health. We've seen how language becomes, a little more destigmatized as we're intentional with it, the way that we use it in media. So in this case, I think that focusing on the status quo, what the industry has been thus far, is accurate, valid, and truthful. But can we commit to depicting a sustainable workforce? Because there are so many restaurants, organizations, industry workers on an individual level who are committed to resisting that status quo and thinking outside of the box, kind of like CHOW does. And there are so many tactful plugins to the way that the show is created, where I believe that they would actually add value to the storyline, considering that these are all fleshed out three-dimensional characters, right?
Totally. I'm so curious in that last scene, were they talking about challenges? Were they getting into things like mental health and imposter syndrome and fear and anxiety and depression and substance abuse and things like that? Or were they just talking about their passions and motivations?
Just barely. And here is the beautiful part. Since joining CHOW, I have often been privy to conversations in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. Being in a professional position like mine means that you are often given a seat at the table, and you listen, you're a fly on the wall on these conversations happening. And often you think to yourself, if we could have a CHOW expos right now in this conversation, this person, CHOW expos, for those of you who don't know, are the folks who moderate our online spaces. They're experienced peers offering support, much like an expos in the kitchen. They facilitate the front of the house to the back of the house. So they make sure that all of our conversations, have a direction, that they're met with resources, that everybody feels heard and seen, and they leave the meeting feeling supported. So what this was a very baseline kind of conversation of, here are the challenges that I have faced in a very superficial manner. And I found myself thinking a CHOW expos would pull and extrapolate a lot with insightful questions. This has the transformative power to become a really impactful foundational conversation for how the industry could go. And that's kind of where I find myself at CHOW. I'm often in these rooms that I think to myself, man, a CHOW expos would turn this conversation
totally
really beautifully.
I'm so curious if those lines were scripted or if they were real, But there's an opportunity, right? They're dipping their toe in the water. It's like, let's take it further. I wonder why they did that scene.
I think that there's this kind of, the last episode, there's this, again, spoiler alert for anyone who has not watched. In season 1, Carmi's experience is very much dictated by this very damaging chef who is verbally abusive to him on the line. In fact, this was one of the core, when I started creating content around our petition, a lot of those scenes are what I used. There's mention of self-harm. There's incredibly damaging language that this chef is using to communicate to the main character. And he does that in this very insidious way as he's cooking, standing over his shoulder, speaking in his ear. And I'm talking about it now and I have goosebumps because as an adult person, I also have had an abusive chef in my ear for 15 years. I think it is a shared experience that I have heard from many people, that we have all internalized a very damaging voice that we encountered at some point in our career. And I even want to give a moment to affirm the human resilience of a lot of people that managed to shelf that voice. My personal journey is that I internalized that voice and then it started to sound like me. And I used it to propagate that abuse. And so in episode 3, Carmi is given this opportunity to kind of confront this chef who has been the voice inside of his head, even though Carmi has been applauded and he's gained fame and recognition. the voice inside his head is really that one damaging chef, which is, gosh, so telling of the human condition, the way that I have experienced it. And he's given this opportunity to confront this chef. And in one of the pivotal scenes that just got me in the chest, in fact, it's one of the few times where I had to just kind of click, pause, take a breather, come back to it. He says, I have spent so much time thinking about you, going over this damage, going over it and going over it. And the chef says back to him, I don't think about you at all. And a pit in my, I'm having a physical reaction as I am telling you this, because that allowed me to process. I'm telling you that the emotions that I felt around that, which I then, took to a protected space and to my therapist, honestly, because it's been such a moving experience, allowed me to process in bulk so much scar tissue that was stagnant for me. And I think that that's common. I think that a lot of folks watching will experience the same kind of thing, and they deserve to know that there is a place that can hold that.
Yeah, you're bringing that up for me right now, which is super emotional, and I'm grateful for CHOW because I have that voice too, and yeah, it's there and it's heavy and it's kind of weekly, not daily anymore, but it's pretty weekly still. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
So you've got the audience here. Let's what's the ask here? Who, if anybody's listening, that can make this happen, who do you want to talk to? How do we make this happen?
Yes. Okay. Well, first and foremost, before the ask, I would like to encourage folks to please continue taking care of yourselves. With this, while I've been a dog with a bone with this project, there have been a lot of people who have said, I want to support, but I just can't watch it. I want to support, but I just can't consume that content. That is fair, that is valid, and that is 100% okay. One of the things that I've learned in my time spent in these exceptional spaces where we talk about mental health and wellness and recovery is that things are sometimes very much like a race where we're passing the baton to each other. With this specific thing, my own personal experience of having been an active participant in that toxic culture makes my drive Herculean when it comes to this. To me, it's a labor of love, because on a personal level, I think that I can create a lot of positive change here because it is driven by a lot of that damage that I did, right? This willingness to make amends, to take it further. And so we do as much as we can, and we meet people where they are. And then once we've reached our limit, we pass the baton and we let someone else run. And so your support can come in so many different ways that does not require you to traumatize yourself consuming that content or, going against your boundaries or your needs. Please protect your peace above all else. To everyone else who has the willingness, the capacity, and the bandwidth to interact, I would say up on our CHOW blog, our website is www.chowco.org. I have written an article that talks about why I believe the bear is a love letter to the industry. And that is essentially me writing a love letter to the bear. In this article, I am talking about how I have felt seen, moved, heard, saddened, traumatized. I've been steeped in my food, beverage, hospitality industry for 3 seasons. I believe that it is accurate, an accurate depiction. I believe it is linear. I want it to be trauma informed. I want it to be less exploitative. I want, when we share the stories of people in the food, beverage, hospitality industry, because that's what's happening here, right? We're not putting names on it, but we're delivering this content with very recognizable public figures. And so we're using stories. And we're no strangers to using stories as tools at CHOW, right? It's part of our mission, using shared story skills and resources to improve the lives of food, beverage, hospitality industry. So I want there to be accountability about how these stories are used and giving folks the opportunity to know that there is something else happening so that we can stop this romanticization of the system the way that it's been, right? I want for the creators, producers, the creatives that work on this show, to be in alignment with our mission and to say that conversations around mental health and recovery and wellness do have a place in the hospitality industry. They deserve a place, and that folks who are being activated while consuming this content also deserve a place. And I want them to acknowledge that CHOW and organizations like CHOW, the CHAD Project, Not 9 to 5, Restaurant After Hours, have been working behind the scenes for years to support folks who have been making impactful changes. So on a macro level, the big ask is for the creators to get involved, to find out more about what we are doing, and to feature it prominently after each episode closure. Similarly to when I consume content centered around intimate partner violence, I am often left supported by trigger warnings and resources. And those are a lot more commonplace, right? We know a lot about intimate partner violence, probably more than we do about mental health in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. And on a micro level, if you are someone in the food, beverage, hospitality industry who has consumed this content and feels the same, or know someone or love someone in the food, beverage, hospitality industry who has experienced the same reactions after having consumed this content, please consider signing the petition and joining your voice to ours so that it could be a big scream that cannot be ignored.
Yeah, it's a beautiful article. I'll put the link in the show notes so everyone can access it.
Thank you.
The work that CHOW is doing and all these organizations are doing it's so important, it's so necessary, and there's so much more work to be done. You know, I love when we are able to sit around and board meetings and hear from everybody on the team that, what more can we do? How can we make a bigger impact? We've got just an incredible team of people, and so happy that you're in the role that you're in and that you're doing this work and that you're making an impact in yourself in addition to the lives of others. So thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. Like I said, we'll share the article and the petition in the show notes here. If you have been touched or impacted by anything that we've discussed today, please go over to chowco.org. Check out our meeting schedule. Again, they're in person, they're virtual. If you want something a little bit more intimate, the text service is absolutely incredible. And there's just so many resources available. So we're here, we hear you, we see you, we love you. And please share this with anybody in the industry that you think needs it or could benefit or knows someone, or like Jasmine said, loves someone who could benefit from listening.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. I have nothing to add other than please come join us at a meeting. Now you know a friendly face in the room. If you ever need assistance and want somebody to go with you, or you're looking for a resource that isn't specifically listed on our website, we are also resource brokers, which means that we can get you connected to the place that you need to go if CHOW is not that place. So I will add, if it's okay with you, my CHOW email as well for folks who want to reach out directly is community@chowco.org, and we can assist in getting you connected to so many systems of support. And I'm your friendly face in the CHOW meeting space now. So I'd love to come to a meeting with you if you'd like to give it a try.
Awesome. All right, Jasmine, thank you so much. I hope to see you at the all staff retreat here coming up in a couple months. So
thank you. I'm super excited.
You bet. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us. Again, please share this episode or podcast with anyone that you know in the restaurant industry that could benefit, and we'll talk to you next week.